Hello, welcome back to Proud Monster, Eastern Front 1941. Just getting into the Russian second week of September. It's been an interesting ride actually, because I've played it a number of times, and with most East Front games that start with the Barbarossa scenario, the German always tends to feel he's doing really well, but when he sits back and does a VP check, he's generally not doing quite so well as he perhaps thought he was. And that's been my experience with Proud Monster, in that you get a really good start, things look very desperate for the Russians, and then either the Germans take the von Paulus pause in one of its three guises, or they suffer the full effects of the gas line and things stabilise, and then they grind to a bit of a halt. And a sort of wily Russian can sometimes bring the game to a much slower pace. In this game, I think the last video I did, we were at the decision point of to pause or not to pause, and in this run of play I decided to go without the pause, just to push on as hard and fast as possible. And it's one of those things, after the event you always convince yourself that whatever choice you made wasn't quite the right one. Or, maybe the first opportunity when most of the infantry were catching up, that would have been a good opportunity for a 1 week pause, and I'd got the -1 DRM. Or if I pause for 1 week, then why not do a second and then get a -3? So all those sorts of calculations are running through your head, but I just decided just to ignore it completely. And sure enough, things seemed to grind down again. I thought, oh, here we go. It's all stalling. But the fact that the Germans kept on pushing, and looking at Rob Van Tol's interesting attrition graph that I showed last time, where if you can do 50 or more Russian steps a turn, you will start to wear the Russians down. And that's actually what's happening now, I think, because this is the last turn of dry weather. The third week of September you have to start to draw chits for the weather. I'm going to go with the variable weather rather than historical, just to keep it interesting. It's a dead Russian unit. So that may hurt them again, but the second week of September was their last opportunity for their seasonal offensive, which they took. Didn't work out quite to plan. There was a few potential breakthroughs that didn't happen due to the gods of war and dice. But in the south there's a bit of a dangerous breakthrough, which you'll see in a little while. So the Russians again need to patch it up. So they've been continually having to readjust the line. The corners are always getting hit at quite big odds. And if the Germans can keep attacking and doing 1-2 results, or sometimes 1-3 results, that essentially is a single step on a Russian division. Sorry, on a German division, which equates to 1 attack factor and 1 defence factor. So 1 German step, but 2 or 3 Russian counters. So sometimes if you look at the map, you think, if I could just remove 50 German steps here, the map essentially wouldn't really look any different. If I took off 50 or 60 Russian counters, the map would look markedly different. So the attrition strategy is definitely viable, I think. But yeah, it's kind of sort of in the balance, I think, now. VPs are running at 20. There's a few more up for grabs soon. I think Kharkov is a couple, Stalino is 1 or 2. There's some others. Rostov is worth a couple. And the problem I've had previously is there's a sudden death victory for the Germans, where they win up until I think the beginning of December, and then in December, second half I think, there's suddenly a double gate where in fact it's not just they can auto win, they can also auto lose. So there's a minimum number, I think it's 27, they've got to get to that or they'll just lose the game. I mean, you could decide just to continue the game. There was a concept of forgiveness points in the Death and Destruction Command magazine, which followed on from the Proud Monster, which added on the 1942 and onwards. And they said, well, if you lose, you just give the other guy one forgiveness point and keep going, which is still viable for this. For those that really want to get into 1942 and see how it plays out, if you think it's still quite tight and there's more to be learnt. I made a mistake in my chat last time about refitting. So mech units don't have to be in urban centres to refit, but they've just got to be west of the gas line. So slightly easier than I at first thought. So that's probably enough chat. The Russians are in patch-up mode. They've got a week for the second week of September. Then they've got a reinforcement phase where they're going to get some sorely needed reinforcements. I think the leg rebuild has gone up to 3, but I think they control about 8 reinforcement centres now, having just lost Dnipropetrovsk, which is 1. They've just lost Arel, that's another 1. So that's 6 more divisions that the Russians aren't going to get, and they're not going to get either of those back, so that'll be 2 more lost. So quick look at the map and I'll show you where we are. Right, so in the south you'll see that this is the area where the Germans had an effective use of their seasonal offensive. They managed to break through here. They had some infantry in reserve that's allowed to move in the reserve phase, in the friendly reserve phase during a seasonal offensive. So they've been able to break through and push down now towards that is Stalino here. That's worth 2 points. So that's probably going to be the next target. There's also a recruitment centre with the star. So all those things are starting to strangle the rate of reinforcements. There's Dnipropetrovsk, now occupied by some Romanians. That was worth 2. They've managed to bottle up the Russians at the heavy fort going into the Crimea. So see how we go on up here. If they can take some points here to make their December gate safe, they can now potentially pull back in the winter, because this is of course west of the gas line, so that'll be full effects there. There'll be no role to make for that. Moving along, the Russian line again pulled back. We had an issue here. This was going to be a breakthrough point, but it failed, and there was Panzer Corps in reserve that could have potentially got through to overrun Kursk, but it never happened. So the Russians were quite grateful for that. The line in front of Moscow is looking a bit shaky. These fortification lines are now active, so that's a bit of a godsend. The front line has been cracked. They're pulling back to the second line, and then you've got Moscow itself. There's a couple of Russian, but I think they're just tank brigades. But don't tell the German player that. There's a couple of German divisions, mech divisions, just dropped back behind the gas line. They're going to have something like 4 replacement points to spend next turn. I think that's their last mech refit. A lot of the other German armour is in a pretty poor state, to be fair, so it's it's not all bad news for the Russians. They are actually, the Germans are making progress around Leningrad as well, with a pretty meagre commitment. It's all struck me as a bit of a dead end. You've got the 5 VPs for Leningrad that's really, really hard to take, and there's nothing else which you can take to compensate for any effort which you've made around there. I mean, obviously if you can take it, again it's another recruitment centre, it's worth 5 points, which is huge, but it's fairly easy to reinforce at the moment. And you think, well, maybe if I'd have sent some more guys up here, then I could have actually got through here. But because it's a very dynamic situation, the Russians can react to threats like that, and you can reinforce quite heavily. There's a large town here, Novgorod, so you can reinforce at these 2 points, and it's pretty nasty terrain. The forts are all active. You need to garrison the Finnish border by the end of this turn, so another couple of brigades or cavalry divisions will have to drop into these 2 hexes. Otherwise you'll forfeit a victory point, which you really don't want to do. So that's where we are. So, you know, a pretty battered Russian line at the moment. They've fallen back behind this river. There's the Kalmius River here, which they'll probably drop behind that as well. Spare what they can to defend Stelino. Make the Germans fight for that. But yeah, another bug out I think is required. See you next time.